Welcome to Books on Point. The informal business sector is often regarded as the next great frontier of Africa, and it's undergoing economic revolution, a new world of small people doing big things and transforming the continent. Kasinomic Revolution is a story of Kasi entrepreneurs on one side and on the other of great corporate success and failures in the informal community. We're joined in studio by GG Alcock, who is the author of Kasinomic Revolution. GG, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, you have a fascinating background. You are fluent in Zulu and you grew up in KZN. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So my parents were political activists. They believed the only way to change people's lives was to live like them. So I built a mud hut with no running water, no electricity in a place called Msinga in KwaZulu-Natal, which is one of the most arid, poor places even today. In fact, my mother still lives just like that in a mud hut with no running water in Msinga. And we were brought up like that. My mother taught us at home, and we grew up in the local rural Zulu community.
All right. What inspired you to write the book Kasinomic?
So I have a marketing business called Minanawe, and we focused on that township market. And one of the things that we found was that no one knew anything about this informal economy. And yet it is it's incredibly bustling, busy space. And I wanted to write about it on two levels. One was to expose that sector. But I also think that the real secret for jobs and the economic growth of our country is within that informal sector. And yet we don't recognize this huge sector. I mean, just the food sector, what I call Gasi courses, 50,000 outlets turning over 87 billion rand a year, is a massive sector in hair and spaza sector and so on and so forth. The muti industry is worth 3 billion rand a year in herbal medicines. So it was really about exposing that sector, and I believe there's a revolution happening in the sense that it's starting to disrupt the formal sector and dominate.
Based on that, then, maybe from some of the conversations you're having with either stakeholders, be it in government or wherever the case may be, are people starting to take notice of the informal sector? And are you confident that at some point we might see the definition of employment be tipped on its head, and where we now recognize informal entrepreneurs as people who are actually employed?
Well, not enough. And I think the big thing is we don't recognize informal businesses as businesses. We see them as subsistence and survivalists. We believe that someone who's working in this sector would take a job any time. And I wrote about many stories. The one couple, what I call Golden Delicious in downtown Joburg, who sell 3,000 vet cook a day for R1 each, as well as about 500 rands worth of tea, coffee and other things. And they make a profit about 35,000 rand a month. They're building a two-story house in Meadowlands in Soweto, and they've been there for 12 years, and the reality is that we see them, then whenever we walk past them we say, oh shame. Now what we should be doing is we should be saying, how do we support those businesses? I mean, there's 50,000 informal businesses out there. We should be looking at municipal bylaws. We should be looking at being able to give them credit and so on, because that is really the only we're not going to create 1 million jobs in the formal sector. So how do we support this? And a lot of what I wrote about was how government, municipalities, business, financial institutions can support and grow this sector of our economy.
All right, so talk to us about the journey of writing the book, because some of the stories here are absolutely fascinating. There's a really real human element to them, and I can imagine you came across a lot of businesses that also have like a unique background and story to them. How did you come about it selecting the key ones that you wanted to showcase to the reader?
So look, I think Africa is a human continent, and we talk all about digital and stuff, and as I wrote about, this is about real people and about real stories, and I wanted to showcase that's not just about numbers, and these are people who are amazing entrepreneurs and survivalists, and I kind of bumped into them when one led to another. I wanted to meet someone who had run a very successful food business, and then I met TT in Soweto, who for 20 odd years has run this food restaurant, and then I was invited to Nigeria, and I went to meet a company, the Tolerant Group, that turns over $1 billion a year in instant noodles. They made they made Nigeria the 5th biggest per capita consumer of instant noodles on the planet. And some I went and looked for, because it was like there must be more success stories in this sector. And funnily enough, what I call the Kasinomic guerrillas, which were the like street fighters, the real people on the ground, there were thousands. I ran out of case studies I could write about them. the corporate businesses that are successful in that space are very few and far between. You know, a lot of people are just, it was easier to find the counter-revolutionaries, as I call them, the people who failed dismally because they didn't take into account brands like Chappies and Champion Toffees. I mean, I wrote about my little monkey that introduced me to Chappies. So there were very few success stories, and this is a crazy thing. The opportunity in that space is massive. And if you look at the informal economy, is very much like the gig economy, you know, the Airbnb and Ubers of the world. It's a new economy. We don't really know how to access it. We suddenly say, wow, there's opportunity. Well, how do we enter that? And so it's a new frontier, as you read out just now. Yeah.
I can imagine there's also misconceptions about townships. I mean, what are some of the typical ones you come across?
I think there's huge misconceptions around townships, that place is only of poverty and everyone's unhappy in the townships. And yet the townships, I called my first book Kasinomics because it was about the economics of Egasi. And it's become a real bustling urban space. And yes, of course there's poverty and stuff, but the vast proportion, you know, 60 to 70% of the population in those places is urban. And yet they're very culturally centered, you know. It's about the food that is culturally, the lifestyles are very built around culture. So a lot of the successes are really about understanding that Gasi vibe. Is about understanding the culture of people in those spaces.
For someone who grabs a copy of your book, what do you want them to walk away with at the end of the chapters?
So, funnily enough, a lot of the people who've grabbed the book that gives me the greatest happiness are people who are Gasi people or young entrepreneurs. One guy wrote to me, he'd moved out of a business job and he started a little distribution business to the food outlets. He's using his grandfather's 1989 Nissan 1400 bakkie, his Goko's back room as a storage unit, and he's doing that. And a lot of people, I say, you know, we need to look in the mirror and not out the window. You know, the opportunities are around us, and I would like government, municipalities, and particularly Gasi people to see that the opportunities are there amongst them. You know, I talk about, we built a 1.5 billion rand industry in cheese slices going into Gordas and Vetkoek in the townships, and it shouldn't have been someone from outside Gasi who's doing that, you know. And I think that people need to look at that more and more, and I think those are where the opportunities are for jobs and micro enterprises.
GG, thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there. That's GG Alcock, who is the author of Kasinomic Revolution, The Rise of African Informal Economies. Our recommended book for the week is titled Poverty Proof, 50 Ways to Train Your Brain for Wealth by Douglas Kruger. If you've ever wondered why some people work hard yet remain poor and others seem to rise out of poverty and become affluent in a short span of time, this book presents 50 principles that can help you escape poverty and become wealthy. After the break, SME on Point with Diabo Seto, and from me, goodbye until Friday.